Talking nerdy. We're just talking nerdy. With all this talking nerdy. Oh, come on, you wanna talk nerdy?
Welcome to our reflections episode on a mecha who was the BlackNES guy, which was, if you didn't check that episode out, it's a pretty awesome one, all about essentially Kindle Direct Publishing, which was them. Mecca, who's an old friend of mine, had started this online business and creating guidebooks for people who were buying NES systems. And it was interesting to me, a lot of things. I mean, you listened to this episode again, right, Frank?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
also quick note, what's crazy is this was 2 years ago. This
Yeah.
we released this 2 years ago and we recorded it a couple months before that. So listening back to this was a real blast from the past. I forgot a lot about it because 2 years ago was the last time I listened to it before it went live, and it was a lot of fun. This was a really fun episode to listen to.
Yeah, this was a sleeper episode. I feel like this was a great episode that had lots of value that a lot of people should listen to, but because it was, I just feel like it flew under the radar of people, because I actually think there's something in this episode that every single business could probably use, every single business could probably make money with, but they are not because they just don't even know about
And
it.
you mean
And
sleeper episode as in like it flew under the radar because what? Kindle Direct Publishing just isn't something that people talk a lot about?
maybe. I don't know. I just think that it's one of those things that it just wasn't as big, or like a mecha is not someone with hundreds of thousands of followers online.
Right. Yeah.
He's not Monkey DM. He's not Arcane Anthems. He's not Hope Christofferson. He's not somebody who could just like share this and get us hundreds of listens of this podcast. A mecha episode performed okay, but it was one that I don't think as many people actually listened to, unless they were already subscribed. And it was in our first season ever. So how many people went back and actually listened to things? That's why we do these reflections episodes, by the way, is so you can go back and listen to some of the gold we've already discovered, and also give you a little bit of our summation on how these businesses have transitioned, changed, or impacted us in the future, which I think this one is actually still in many ways relevant, but there are some very significant changes in that industry that I think we should talk about.
Yeah, and real quick about Emeka, so if someone that's listening to our discussion right now hasn't heard that interview or doesn't know anything about Emeka, you could look on YouTube and find his YouTube channel, My Self Publishing Blueprint. That is a channel with about 17.8 thousand subscribers. He's got 670 videos, but he hasn't posted a video in, it looks like, a year. And pretty much he coaches people to help them publish their own books. And he also does that where he publishes his own books anyway. And you met him years ago.
Yeah, he used to sell knives. He was a district manager with me. We partied in Vegas together. We have lots of stories going way back. Maybe if you ever get him back on again, we'll talk about those. But it was, yeah, he's a great guy. He's always been sort of the hustler type, as in like he has hustle, not that he hustles people, but like he's got that hustle of an entrepreneur. And he was always like, oh man, I've got something on the rise. I've got this going on. So I know he's doing other stuff too. Like he continues to publish things and do coaching, but I know he's also got other businesses and other things. Like he's apparently maybe going to be doing something in Mexican wrestling, because he's like a very built, huge guy, and he lives in Mexico most of the time. And he was I saw him posting about like literally being like on stage as a Mexican wrestler for something. So this is a guy who just kind of goes into different directions. He has a full family. He's made lots of money. He also really likes RAV4s, which is a weird thing, but he's very nerdy niche into that, and he makes content around RAV4s now, which is like a special four-wheeler.
He went from Jeep. He went or Range Rover. He went from Range
Range
Rover
Rovers,
to
yeah.
RAV4s.
Oh, sorry, I don't know. Isn't that the same thing?
I don't know. But in the interview,
I'm not a
his
car
Range
nerd,
Rover.
so yeah, it must be Range Rovers. I think he was doing Range Rover stuff at the time too. He's still doing that. But I want to get into this episode. Let's get to the content, because people are listening to us wax about this, and I want to get to some gold and nuggets. Tell me, what was your first big nugget out of this episode for you?
Man, okay. So the first thing that really popped up and really stuck with me in this interview was his emphasis on quality control, and the times that he did succeed in that, and the times that he didn't succeed in controlling his quality, and how that suffered, and how that impacted his reviews, and the point he made around those reviews. Do you remember what that was?
Yeah, it has to be an emotional reaction. Basically, a review is an emotional reaction to whatever you put out.
That's right.
And so, if whatever you're putting out has the option to be reviewed, if you're getting a good review, it's because you created a emotional reaction. If you're getting a bad review, you're creating an emotional reaction in a bad way. And bad reviews are way easier to elicit than good reviews. So you should be very conscious
And that's,
about it.
yeah, and that's why the good quality control is super important, because if you get that positive emotional reaction, then you're going to get those good reviews, because in the beginning you start off asking your friends and family to give you good reviews, right? And that only goes so far, and you eventually have to actually earn those good reviews with the public people that are paying dollar for your product.
Yeah, we wouldn't know anything about that as a podcaster,
No.
and getting good or bad reviews or emotionally pissing off an audience. Tune in for
Ugh,
another episode about that one.
still
But
digging
yeah,
out of that.
no, we've created some emotional positives and negatives with some of our content. Apparently, it's crazy when you just interview people. But hey,
Yeah.
if you do like us and we've created a positive emotional response in your life, please go give us a 5-star review and say some good things about us, especially if you live in America, which is where most of the
especially
people who we pissed off live.
especially if you have
So
an Apple phone.
yes, all those Apple people. We're doing great on Spotify. We are like high rating on Spotify. We got like our podcast rating on Apple Podcasts in America specifically is a little bit low. We still are 5 stars in Canada.
Oh, great.
So just so you know,
It's
we're still
all,
five
so
stars
all
up there.
those
Yeah, we're doing
haters
great.
that we had were Americans.
Oh, hard to believe, isn't it?
Yeah,
That
right.
Americans can
Crazy.
get pissed off about stupid stuff. But yeah, that happens. That happens.
So what
So
else
that
stood out to you?
Well, outside, here's the thing. The whole thing was around publishing books, which I thought was interesting. And
But there was
what
so
stuck,
much that wasn't about books
well,
too,
he
which is
wasn't a
cool.
writer. Like, this is it. Like,
Yeah,
I want to talk about what I think is the CEO mindset. Okay. Emeka has a CEO mindset. So he had a big idea around, like, wow, there's an opportunity for me to publish a game book in alignment with when NES is when Nintendo is re-releasing their NES system at the same time. And so I can't remember what it's called, but it was like NES Classic or
that's
something
right.
like that. Yeah. And so they were releasing this as a big product. And he's like, oh, there's an opportunity here. But then he got to work on, like, well, the opportunity is a guidebook. I know enough about games, but I'm not a writer. I don't want to go through and write it. I also don't have time to do it all because I got everything going on. So what am I going to do? I'm just going to go hire someone. And then he's like, I don't know about the graphics, so I'm going to go hire someone for that. And then he just basically had this mindset of, well, whatever I'm not good at, I'm going to invest in it. And this is the risk of being an entrepreneur, because he's putting money out initially to create something, but under the assumption that it will come back in after that investment in significant numbers, which is what he said at the very top of the podcast. $80 to create the book, $10,000 out of the results from it. So just that one thing alone gets me interested in what is that mindset. And the CEO mindset is that you should not be doing everything in your business. And you don't need to be, like, for example, take us for example, like, what should we be doing? What shouldn't we be doing in our business? And I believe that, yes, there are some things I like doing, like editing and, doing that. Like, I like being on the podcast and talking with you and sharing insights and getting reflections. All those things are key. Yes. But are there things that we could invest in that up our overall profitability as a business long term? And what are the things I don't have to be doing as a CEO?
Yeah, it's really hard to think about that sometimes, especially for people who aren't used to delegating, for people who aren't used to asking others to do it. Because a lot of the time, a nerdpreneur is someone who's doing a job that they're not a huge fan of, and they get an idea, or they've recognized there's an opportunity with something that they like doing, but maybe they haven't been a manager. They haven't been a team lead before, at least not for a long period of time or whatever it is. They're not aware of what they can ask to be done. I definitely have that issue. And that's why when listening to this, there's a lot of opportunities for me to think, oh, okay, like it's funny how he just jumped in and said, I'm going to make books, but I'm not going to be the writer. And it's like, wait, why are you going to make books then if you're not a writer and if you're not going to be writing them? That blows my
Mhm.
mind. But he saw this
Well,
opportunity, like you were saying, with the NES Classic. He saw the
yeah.
opportunity, he saw the dollar signs, and he knew that he knew how and he knew where to get the people to do a lot of the work as he organized it and orchestrated it.
Yeah, and I think this comes down to the lesson of, timing is more important than strategy sometimes.
Yeah.
And he didn't necessarily, he had some idea of like a strategy, but he just knew the timing had to be right. If he published it too late, he would have missed the wave of people looking for guidebooks online and he would have made nothing. So it was more about like getting this thing done and ideally having the quality that was good enough to get him reviewed and positives. And, once he nailed those two things, that's how he was able to get the result of $10,000 for an 80 or $100 book or whatever that he paid someone to make. And again, he was involved in the process of writing from a strategic standpoint of like, how is this going to look and structured? What are the most important things? What screenshots do we want? Like, the person was coming to him with versions of it and he was correcting it, guiding it, much like a pilot might correct the plane 90% of the way there until they get to their direction,
Because he
right?
knew,
To get to
yeah,
their
because he
destination.
knew the niche. He was a
Yeah.
gamer. He still is a gamer, and he knew what he would want to see. So he was able to critique and edit with that eye.
Yes. Yes.
One of the
You gotta.
on that note, there's this idea of finding that niche. In this case, he's a gamer, so he understood the NES Classic was going to have demand around it because it's something he knows. And he also later on talked about how just painfully boring it can be to do books, or, and this is a general note, to do anything that you don't know or don't care at all about. He said how at one time he did an ebook on coding and he absolutely hated it because he didn't know it. He had to learn a lot of the stuff on the fly. He had very little foundational knowledge. And he said, never again. I'm only going to do books on something that I know or something that I enjoy learning about. And that ties into the idea of finding a niche, and not just finding a niche for a book, but finding a niche for anything you want to do.
How do you identify your own niche? I think is really important for people who are aspiring nerdpreneurs to do. And I believe that one of the things I would consider is, where do you have a powerful story? Like you've had some form of transformation or some personal experience where you can leverage your story to create that niche and or to serve that niche. So if you have, in his case, done a lot of games, understood what a good book is, and he's actually understands the gamer mind. All right, well, because he's had that, he knows what to put into that book to create it. You take another example of like, or like a urban tarantulas. It's his personal experience of creating a business around breeding tarantulas and it affecting his life, right? That he's now able to create content in that niche that really serve other people around, breeding and creating and like, actually getting people excited about tarantulas. So because of the personal story that you have, your marketing is based on stories. So when you have a good story, that might be a place where you can serve and create a niche that you actually can market to.
Urban Tarantula was an interesting interview that came up in this interview with Emeka as well. And I think it's an interesting case study because Urban Tarantula had this business already where he was breeding and selling tarantulas. And at the time we interviewed him, his business was shifting to more content creation. There was more money there. It was more sustainable. It was less of the breeding work that he's been doing. He said he had between 3,000 and 5,000 tarantulas, give or take a couple thousand. And finding that business opportunity in something you're already doing is what I hear you're saying. And I think that's a great idea. Sometimes there's so many directions that can go. If say
Mhm.
you're doing something like you're I'll just use myself for an example. If I am making video content or I am doing product photography, there's so many different directions I could go, different niches. But it comes down to what do I enjoy? And the other point that Emeka talked about is doing some keyword research, see where there's demand. And that's a great point. That's something that I've done in the past for one time when I wanted to do a YouTube channel on Joseph Campbell and Here with a Thousand Faces. Well, there's no keyword traffic for that. And I decided, well, right then and there, I'm not going to do it. So looking into the keywords is a great idea. Like, how would you search it? Just start typing it. If you're someone that already understands the topic, Google
Yeah.
search it, see what content's out there, and if there's any competition. And if there is not any competition, why is that?
Yeah, like if he wanted to, Urban Tarantulas could get a book written about how to breed tarantulas. And there's probably some traffic on that on Kindle Direct or on Amazon. And what's interesting is that, if he did that, maybe he'd sell this like $20 ebook all the time and be another source of income. But think about that for your niche. If you're an aspiring nerdpreneur, maybe it's on dice making, right? Or maybe it's on I mean, it could be on D&D stuff. There is a lot of people already doing this in the D&D market, so it's pretty saturated. But the idea of, people going on Amazon looking for Dungeons and Dragons content that isn't just licensed. Like there's people who are writing their own dungeon masters guides. There's people who are writing books of NPCs. There's people who are looking at books of traps that are like, hundreds of traps to lay in your dungeon. Like, and then Amazon, when you go look and say, "Oh, I want to buy the new 5e book that Wizards of the Coast just put out," they'll suggest these other books to people. And all of a sudden, if your book is in that list and it has a high rating and lots of reviews that make it positive, all of a sudden you're selling books for 20, 30, 40, $50 each on demand. And it's a pretty solid business model because it's evergreen. It just keeps coming in from people looking for that SEO word traffic.
While listening to this interview, I had the thought of, you know what, you really just need, it's about like 4 years of experience doing a full-time kind of gig before you start to really understand an industry and how that work is done. I mean, you could say like, yeah, after year one, but like really you encounter so many more scenarios, problems, hurdles, and you create so many new solutions by 4 years. And you could say 5 years too, whatever. But 4 years is a really good benchmark I have found in all the jobs I've held. And if you have 4 years of experience at, say, thrift shopping, and you go to Goodwill, you buy something cheap, and you know what to look for, those are the kinds of things that people would love to do on the side. Shopping's fun. Well, what if you did shopping and then you turned the item around and you're able to make more? Or you're making clothing from scratch, or whatever it is you want to do. If you've got 4 years of
Maybe you're a
experience,
cosplayer,
yeah, a cosplayer, absolutely. If you've
how to
got
make costumes,
Yeah, if you've got 4 years of experience, like you're borderline an expert on that. I would probably say you are an expert on that, and people would pay for that information.
Yeah, and honestly, if you might think, well, I'm so much worse than the other cosplayers that I aspire to be, and that might be true, but they aren't teaching people how to do it. And I'll tell you, like, this is something I saw in the music industry. There are so many rappers. Like, let's just take Eminem for a second. Number one rapper in the world, whatever, right? You can go down the list, Jay-Z, Nas, all these great rappers, right? Nas is the only one who's done a masterclass on how to write. All right. And it's interesting because his masterclass, he probably got paid a bunch to do it, and or he gets a cut of whatever they sell at masterclass or something. I don't know how they make money, but he's the only one. But there are dozens of rappers you've never heard of, okay, that are producing content all the time on YouTube and teaching people how to rap. how to make music and get success in the music industry. One of them, for example, like we interviewed Wishmaster. He's somebody who has put out beat making courses, for example, and he's an example of that, right? And then he also has put out some content around like how to make it as a musician, and putting your beats online, that kind of thing. But then there's also like, if you go to Smart Rapper at YouTube, there's a guy who has huge following. He's a multi-millionaire, and you probably have never heard one of his songs, although he has a bunch of songs. You've probably never heard one of his songs though, because he's not one of those like top 10, top 20 rappers, but he's ultra, ultra successful in the music industry, lives in LA, drives around like in a bright green Ferrari type car, okay, and just puts out content, and sells courses, memberships on how to get better as a rapper. So I'm telling you this because guess what? You don't have to be the number one rapper in the world to make a rap course. You just have to be better than the people you're teaching. You just have to be better than the person who is worse than you, right? The newbie. If you've got 4 years of experience, you're an expert compared to people who've never done it. So that's your avatar.
Yeah, when I started getting into filmmaking, I was looking at a lot of videos about lighting. And there's a lot of videos out there. There's a lot of people who teach you how to make videos on YouTube. And in hindsight, some of those videos were like, oh man, that's so basic. But at the time, I thought it was like groundbreaking. And so there's, just to emphasize your point, like there are people who will know less than you that are looking for that information in a very digestible manner. And some people really like to read. So ebooks in this case make a lot of sense. So one of the other things that stood out to me that Emeka was sharing is, and he makes no illusion around why he does this. He does this for the dollar bill. He is all about, if I don't see dollar signs in that niche, I'm not going to do it. I grabbed a quote from him saying, the amount of money you'll be able to make depends on the niche you're in. Some are seasonal and some are year round. And this ties into the niche that we were just talking about. But if you have an interest and you find that other people have an interest in that as well, is there money? Is there enough interest that can be turned into money? Because sometimes there's interest, but there's not enough interest for people to want to pay for it. And so looking for if there is enough money in something is an important step. And he seemed to be very good at that. He's very charismatic. He talked about a lot of his like good successes and a couple of his, opportunities for learning for sure. But when he looks to do something, it's not just that, oh, he's interested in it, but he really has to see dollars and opportunity there to make thousands of bucks. And if not, he's not going to do it.
What do you think the lesson is in there for people who are aspiring nerdpreneurs?
Make sure that there is money there. I mean, Emeka makes no pretense about it, where he really just wants that money. He's not super passionate about the NES Classic, but he wanted to make money and he saw the opportunity. He says that at one point. And it kind of goes a little bit against what we say, because we talk about on the podcast, do something that you're passionate about, because that is more fun and satisfying. And that's ultimately, Emeka does say that eventually, but make sure that there is money in the opportunity. And that's the takeaway for me from this was double check the dollar signs are there.
I think that's important. Yeah. And you got to have, it's a balancing act between it being a flooded niche of like over competition. I mean, when there's a lot of people doing it, it means there's a market. So there is something to be said about being in a busy market, to starting a Joseph Campbell podcast where nobody's going to listen to it. Right, Frank? So it's like understanding there may be a niche there, but it's so small, there aren't enough people to say sustain it for content, that kind of thing. So it is a balancing act between those things. You have to know, like, all right, I love this thing, but I also need to have a way to get the audience that will sustain my business around that thing. So and that's, I think, an important balancing act that people have to look at when they're deciding if they want to become a nerdpreneur is how niche is this? What is the global audience for this? What is the audience in my area? Are there any examples of people making money with this? And can I sustain myself even if everything goes well?
I will
Because if not, you probably should look at something else.
I will say there's also the exception to this rule where if sometimes celebrities come along and they make a not so enticing topic a high traffic keyword, but that's because they're bringing a following and the
Yeah.
following hears about it and maybe this celebrity makes it entertaining. So someday when I'm famous or I have enough of an audience, then I'll start my Joseph Campbell YouTube
Yeah.
channel and people will like it because they already like my personality and my energy and they're just like, "Oh, Frank's making content, let's go watch this." But in the meantime, I don't have that major following to bring along to that less trafficked idea.
So follow Frank
And help me get the
and help him
following so I can have a Joseph Campbell
so we can
channel.
have that. Yeah. So we can get that Joseph Campbell content going. All
Yeah. And
right.
if you want a taste of what that would sound like, go listen to our Slay Your Dragon Talking Nerdy episode that was a couple months ago for now.
Yeah. Actually, really good episode.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
And about more than just dragons.
Yeah.
So, books are business cards nowadays. This is the other thing I wanted to just touch on.
Yeah, what do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, the way a lot of people hear about people now can be just through a book. And essentially this SEO thing that he was talking about in the episode around Amazon, oh, people looking for keywords and there's people searching up and then your book comes up, right? Well, even if you just sell an ebook for like $5, you have to sell a lot of $5 books to make money. Like you really do. That's why to me, it's like, okay, even at $80 to make 10,000, like that's a good deal, but like $10,000 is not going to last. You spent all that money already, right? So it's gone from that book. So to me, what's the long term of that is once people buy the book, you've got to get them on your list. So like in that first chapter of your book, of your ebook, a lot of ebooks do this. They offer you an opt-in. They give you a lead magnet. It's like, hey, this is the concept of the book. This is what I'm going to cover. Oh, I also have a blueprint of how you can do it that you can go opt into right here at nerdpreneur.com/ whatever. And they go and get that extra bonus. And all of a sudden you have people on your list. And these are people who have identified themselves as very interested in that book concept. So for example, for us, Frank, one way we could get more listeners and more people is to produce a book on all of our podcasts. Like we pull the transcripts, we collect it into a nice, convenient ebook, and we say, hey, these are the lessons from over 30 different interviews with nerdy entrepreneurs. And it's like how to crush your niche and the insights and tactics and strategies used by ultra successful nerdy entrepreneurs. And then that gets to be put up there. And then you know what? People looking for entrepreneurship books might see it. They buy it for $10 or whatever we charge for it, maybe 50. I don't know. It could be somewhere in between that. It's probably worth 500 though,
Oh,
so
yeah.
we'll just give them a
Right.
good
Yeah,
deal. Give them a good deal. But here's the thing, like when they buy it, it's not about the money because like $10 is nothing. Like Frank and I each get, $4 on something like that, maybe, minus our expenses. Now we're not going to be rolling in it. But what happens is we might get an email out of it. We get a client, we get someone who is identified as as a ideal avatar for our products. And then they might go through our sequence later where we could help them with high value courses or coaching or communities or membership sites or anything else like that. So when I say a book is a business card, you can capitalize on Amazon's SEO in your niche. Urban tarantulas. If you wanted to sell a lot more tarantulas, get rid of some of those 5,000 or 6,000 that he has in his basement.
Yeah, right.
He could create a book around breeding tarantulas. Then he could say like, hey, I don't just do that. If you want to see my, breeding course outline, then go to this thing and opt in for it, he could then start getting people on his list who he could sell a breeding course to on Evergreen. And that would just be another way to get leads, and people would continually come in through the book as a funnel. If that makes sense to you, I know I went over that very quickly. Because it's pretty bird's eye. If you want to get more in depth with it, just contact us at Nerdpreneur. But
it's an
that's kind of the fundamental.
It's an interesting idea because it does touch on something that we talk about, where you want to create a lead magnet. You want to create a way to get your audience's email addresses, because email addresses are better than having followers on social media. Email address is that information is something that you can hold on to even if you are kicked off of your social media platform. So having a way to get those email addresses is great. And having a good funnel is important to recognize, like, okay, email address is one of the first things you want to get so that you can take them on through a funnel that is tailored for that avatar, for that audience. Because having that in place means that you are pretty much automating your money generation.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and this is it. It's where I think people want to get to, is having their own lifestyle business, right? Where they don't have to be working all the time, but they're doing something where they're having impact in a niche that they really care about. And that's really the aspiring nerdpreneur, I think, what they want. And so one of the ways you can do that is by creating a book that leads to you in another way. And also you can just make some money off selling the book, which is cool. But if you get the right niche with the right cover and the right transformation that you're promising in the book, all of a sudden you can sell hundreds of those and get dozens of people on your list, and then potentially get some really great clients out of it. And by the way, having a book also gives you positioning in the market. So like, imagine if we had a book on being a nerdpreneur, wouldn't that make us automatically like authorities in the world of entrepreneurship and nerdy entrepreneurship specifically? So realize that a book can also increase your positioning in the market.
Interesting. Yeah. I had a thought along this line recently about just putting a blog up on our website, an article about what is a nerdpreneur, or what is nerdpreneur. So the concept versus the person. And
I think I have a blog I wrote about that, actually. We just got to get it up.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah, like legit. If you go check it out, it's probably up there by now. Like I just have to turn it on, but I was like, let's get 4 or 5 blogs in the bank so that in case, so we can actually start having regular publishing. Hey, nerdpreneurs, Chris coming at you. We'll get back to the episode in just a second, but I wanted to let you know that we did start that blog, and we are going to have some regular articles coming out there. So if you want to find it, go to nerdpreneur.com/blog and check it out for yourselves. Now back to the show. But yeah, I wrote a blog about nerdpreneurship and just sort of it being the future of entrepreneurship.
Oh, I bet it's great.
In today.
I haven't read it, but I bet it's amazing.
Go check it out, guys. It's going to be great.
I'll go check it out too. On that note, what Emeka talks about in this vein of actually doing something that you enjoy, he talks about, I pulled another quote: when you actually enjoy the stuff you're doing, you don't count hours anymore. You count the dollars you're making. And that was really good because, general theme here, Emeka is motivated by the dollar bills. And that's not a bad thing. I want to be clear. Like, that is not a bad thing. Knowing what you're motivated by is super important. We've had several people on the pod that are really motivated by engaging a community. Some that are motivated by helping their community, helping individuals. Some that just really like to make content, and some that just like to breed tarantulas. We've got all kinds of people that are motivated by all sorts of different things, and Emeka just knows that he's motivated by the dollars. That doesn't mean he's going to sell his grandma. He has a line. He clearly has morals in this episode, which is really nice to hear. Like, there is a beautiful medium here of finding where you can be motivated by the dollar sign, but you can also still be a good human being, because not everybody who's motivated by money is a bad person. Hollywood does tell you that. We all have thought that at one time, but that is not really the case.
No, money just makes you more of what you are. So if you have a lot more money, but you were like, if you're broke and you're a shitty person, if I give you a bunch of money, you're just going to be a really shitty person.
Amen.
And if you are a really good person when you're broke and I give you a bunch of money, you'll be a great person, an even better person with money. So keep that in mind, that if you're concerned about the morality of money, it's not money that makes you good or bad. It's your love of money that makes you good or bad, according to
Yeah.
the Bible. So don't love the money, love the people, but use the money for good things. I wanted to finish off on one thing here that I think is interesting, because it's more about how the industry might have changed in the last while. Because when we did this, AI was almost non-existent, wasn't really a thing, and nobody had really talked about it. And in the last year, many of you probably have noticed AI, ChatGPT, and all these different things have been, unleashed upon the world.
Yeah.
And and at the time, writing your own book, you had to hire a writer, right? And you would just have someone else do the writing, and then you would go edit, and it was very manual. Now we have this thing called ChatGPT, where you can actually create a book and a bunch of chapters pretty quickly using just artificial intelligence, and then going through and editing it yourself. So my impression is that this industry has changed significantly since we actually interviewed him. I'd have to follow up with Emeka on that and find out, but I'll tell you, you're probably not high. I would suck to be the writer and who's getting contracts from people doing this kind of thing, because I bet you there's a lot of people who have decided, oh, I'm just going to create my own ebook, and I'm just going to publish that, and I'll just use ChatGPT to be able to create it. And I think that the AI has probably really messed with this industry from from the writers and contractor perspective here.
This is it's a really important topic in this. So I'm glad you bring it up. I do know that Google, they are modifying their algorithm for Google search to take into account AI generated content. So there's going to be this cat and mouse game of like, how long can the people using AI to generate their blogs, their articles, their ebooks, how long can they stay ahead of this algorithm that's looking for their AI content and trying to like not consider it? I mean, because I don't think we want an internet oversaturated with AI generated content. So there is a plan that is being acted on, and I'll be curious how this evolves, and we'll probably see something definitely within the next 3 months, I think, that is going to be about Google cracking down on AI content. So I expect Amazon will be doing something similar, where I bet they'll put a badge of some kind that says, human made or AI generated. So I'll be
Or
curious.
I think, okay, I think yes, but I think it's going to be different than what you're thinking. I think Google wants to crack down on AI generated content so that only their AI generated content gets found. I think it's
Mhm.
more sinister than that, and that may be my questing of it. But here's the thing: Google already is moving away from the idea of search. They're already getting to the point of like, we just want you to interact with our AI, and AI will bring you directly to your answer, and they're going to control what you see. So no longer are you going to find your way through like a dozen websites to find the best option. It's kind of like that "I'm feeling lucky" button that they had on Google, or I
Sure.
think it's still there,
I
right?
remember it. Yeah.
It just takes you to the top search result, the most likely thing to your answer, or answer to your question that you put into Google. And they're moving in that direction, but having it be interaction with AI. So if you're not up to date on how AI is working with Google, but Google is that their latest like public announcement about their AI and what they're looking to do is all about that. That's where they're going. They're going to try and basically control the direction of information and how efficiently you get it, so that you don't have to go through a search anymore to get to it. So I think that, yeah, they want to know what's AI generated content, because they want to be able to sift through that and get rid of it, and only have what they've approved of as good content or ideal solutions to answers that they provide. And then they can sell those things, or they can charge for people to have the right positioning in certain niches or markets.
I sort of agree, but I sort of disagree. What I disagree on is I don't think Google's doing this just to show their stuff. I think because an important part of search engine optimization is credibility, having credibility in what you're doing. And so having credibility with something that is AI generated, that just means being transparent about, hey, this is AI generated, this was prompted, it was created by a human, but ultimately filled out and drafted by an AI, as opposed to this blog was written by a human from start to finish. I did the research on my own. I did use AI to, get some concepts, but ultimately this was written by a human. I don't know how they will prove this, but I expect there will be a sort of badge system, a
Maybe.
certified human made, certified AI made.
Well, I think time will tell, Frank, and we will stay tuned and find out the utopian or dystopian nightmare we're going to live in when Google's AI takes over our pursuit of truth.
Yeah. So everyone listening, thank you for listening. I highly recommend, if you haven't listened to the Emeka interview yet, go to it. There's a lot of other stuff we didn't talk about, such as mindset, how to handle stress, how to be a good person even if you are envious of the success of others. Emeka is high energy. It's very entertaining to hear his stories, and it's a great interview. I say that about all of our interviews, but this one is exceptionally great. So give it a listen if you haven't already. And of course, check us out over on Patreon to get the full interview over there. And as always, Chris,
Keep it nerdy.